Welcome, Professor Sossina Haile, and thank you for joining us today. We are honored to have the opportunity to delve into your incredible journey, your impactful work in material science and sustainable energy, and also your insights on the broader landscape of STEM and education. So to begin, could you kindly introduce yourself to our audience?
First of all, my pleasure to be with you. Yes, I'm Professor Sossina M, a professor of material science and engineering at Northwestern University. I've been here for almost 9 years now, and having been at other institutions before Northwestern.
Great. Let's start exploring your incredible journey from your upbringing. So can you share some insights into your upbringing and early life?
Sure. Yes, I was born in Ethiopia. We spent the first 2 years of my life, I was there. Then we moved to the US for 2 years and then went back to Ethiopia for 5 years. That when I was in lower school, then I was at the English school, the Sanford School, very strict. And then we moved to the US when I was almost 10. This was at the time of the Dark Revolution. And we moved to small town Minnesota, a town of about 2,000 people, where they had never heard of Ethiopia. So I started in 6th grade there, and then finished high school in Minnesota, and then went on from there. Yeah. So in terms of my early childhood, I would say that I had the benefit of being in Ethiopia as a child because I could see Ethiopians everywhere being successful. Whereas coming to the US, you don't see many people of color who are successful. And I can understand how that could be very challenging for someone to see themselves being successful if they don't see anyone like who looks like themselves as being successful. So I had that benefit of those first few years of that positive environment of not explicit role models, but just the expectation that this is what you do, is that you become a doctor, you become a lawyer, you become an engineer, because that's the people that you know.
Yeah, that's true. Could you provide an overview of your higher educational background? So highlighting the key milestones and challenges that you faced during your academic journey.
Yes, so I had in part of my time in Minnesota had been in the public middle school or junior high, which was quite torturous. And so we moved to a private high school, and that was very beneficial for me because this was St. John's prep school. My father had worked at St. John's University, so it was the same campus. This allowed me to take a lot of classes at the university, very small class sizes. So, the teachers knew all the students and supported us, I would say, in doing interesting things, not just, going through the courses per se. So this gave me a strong position to be able to apply for undergraduate education, right? So I applied and was accepted at MIT. I was thrilled, delighted. This had been my goal from as far back as I could remember. So I attended there. As an undergraduate, I learned about the field of material science and engineering when I was there, and I liked it because it connected to so many different aspects of engineering. So if you need to build a bridge, you need to make it out of something. If you need to build a computer, you need to make it out of something. If you want to do a bio implant, you need to make it out of something. So that's where material science came in. I was a very driven student in both high school and undergraduate. So I finished my undergraduate in 3 years. And then I decided I should move institutions. So I went to Berkeley to pursue my PhD. I decided I didn't like it, so I came back to MIT after 1 year and then pursued my PhD at MIT.
So do you remember the moment that inspired you to be a scientist, or particularly in material science?
I always did. I always did because I I always enjoyed math and science. For a while, I thought maybe architecture and urban planning, and maybe I didn't know what specific area within engineering I would pursue, whether for a while it was maybe civil engineering, maybe aeronautical engineering, because I thought it would be fun to be an astronaut. So in that realm, I didn't know. I also didn't ever think of being a scientist. I always thought of being an engineer because I wanted to do something useful. And I think also within the Ethiopian culture, the idea of being a scientist is not, it's just not something you think about. You need to, have a productive life, and an engineer is productive. A scientist is maybe like a philosopher. So it just never occurred to me. And maybe in hindsight, that would have been fun too, but I really enjoy what I do. So I was very active in writing, for example. So some of my teachers were quite surprised that I chose to go to MIT because they thought, but you like to do photography and filmmaking. Why would you go to a place that is narrowly in science and engineering? But I knew that's what I wanted to do.
Your father, Professor Haile, was a renowned Ethiopian scholar and philologist. I'm assuming that his legacy and scholarly pursuits have influenced your academic journey, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. He was, of course, a true inspiration. He was a workaholic, so I gained that from him. He was also very much a perfectionist, so I learned that from him as well. But he also, having been a linguist, he did not want his children to be in an area of academic pursuit which did not have a high opportunity for employment. So that's where it's sort of the chemist, scientist, philosopher, writer, those kinds of things were not really encouraged because you needed to have gainful employment. I mean, we came to the US as, truly refugees, right? So we had our suitcases, that was it. We lived below the poverty line through all of my high school years. There was no luxury of, those types of fields. So even though my father was deeply committed to his profession, that's not the kind of profession he wanted for his children.
I see. Thank you for sharing those insights into your background. So moving forward, let's delve into your current research endeavors. Can you share insights into your current research projects and the specific problems they aim to address?
Yeah. So in my group, we do research on energy technologies, so the materials that allow various solutions to our energy problems. So we do some work in battery areas. A lot of my work has been in fuel cells, which convert chemical energies such as hydrogen into electricity, and they do it very cleanly and efficiently. So we, understand the catalysts that allow these reactions to proceed and develop the materials that are required. So very similar to a battery, a fuel cell has two electrodes, positive electrode, a negative electrode, and an electrolyte in between. So we develop the materials that function for all three of those components. And we've also been doing quite a bit of work to allow fuel cells to operate both in forward and reverse. So just like a battery, you can use a battery to draw energy, and then you recharge your battery so that you can use it later. So in a fuel cell, you can use the hydrogen to make electricity, but if you have excess electricity, you can then use it to make hydrogen to store it for later use. And so it becomes like a battery. And then there are different places where you would need a battery, different places where you would need a reversible fuel cell, sort of depends on lots of different settings. So that's why we pursue both those directions in both technologies. We also do other work in, related areas. So hydrogen production through solar thermal processes where you take sunlight, concentrate it so that you can get high temperatures, and then you drive the reaction that dissociates the water molecule, H2O, into hydrogen and oxygen. So those are the types of things that we do.
Great. Can you highlight some of your most impactful discoveries or contributions in the field of sustainable energy or materials chemistry in general?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to identify sort of what would be the most impactful in the sense of an academic endeavor, because impact is often measured by how many citations a particular paper has, but impact can also be measured by whether or not the technology is being pursued, in a commercially relevant way. I would say that I've certainly had some very highly cited papers because we developed new catalyst materials. I don't know if those materials are explicitly being used in any technology to put them, into a device. In parallel, I've had some of my work has now been taken up by my students who have done a startup company and continuing to try to move that forward into the marketplace. And those are both in the fuel cell side of things.
So yeah, as you just mentioned, your research spans both academic and practical applications, right? So how do you balance the fundamental scientific inquiry with the practical considerations of real-world implementation?
Yeah, I would say that we're much more on the fundamental side than on the practical side, in the sense that I don't myself have a startup company. I know many colleagues who do. I don't. I view that what we do in academia is really train students so that they can be well positioned to take the technology forward, and the training, then we need to provide them with that very fundamental understanding of materials, because you're not going to get that anywhere else. You're going to get the industrial experience, obviously, if you go to industry, right? You're going to sort of learn on the job how to do the marketing, or how to do the find who the buyers are, right? Those kinds of things that I'm just not well positioned to do. So yeah, I definitely balance more on the fundamental side.
Yeah,
But keeping an
nevertheless.
eye towards the value of what we do, not only in terms of the students being trained, but also that these particular technologies that we are discovering and studying do have relevance for that energy solution.
Indeed. Yeah, your research projects are truly fascinating, and I believe they have had contributed to the advancement of the field. So huge congratulations for that. So before we move on to the next topic, let's take a step back and discuss your views on the broader landscape of renewable energy. So I would like to know, in your opinion, what are the most promising materials for advancing the field of renewable energy, and what breakthroughs do you anticipate in the coming years?
Yeah, this is a challenging question, in the sense that while I'm an engineer and I want to have engineering solutions, I struggle knowing that political solutions could get us to the answer of sustainable world much faster than what I can do. Okay, and what technology can do. But that said, I think what technology needs to do is make the political decisions easy. So, for example, the fact that solar energy now, solar electricity is much less expensive than electricity produced by coal or natural gas even. And batteries costs have come down by a factor of 10 in the last, 90%. They've come down within about a decade, right? So these technology advances make policy decisions easy and economic decisions easy. But a lot of that has to do with scaled up manufacturing. And that is, it's such a long step between what we do in the academic laboratory to what happens in the marketplace. But that said, so where do I think there could be some major breakthroughs? I think that, in the battery world, the sodium ion batteries are gaining interest. Lithium ion batteries have many benefits to them, but they also have drawbacks in terms of, dendrites, these things that cause them to go on fire, which is not fully solved, although much less of a problem than it used to be. And then resource limitations, right? Sodium is much more prevalent overall. I think that batteries for stationary power is going to be important in the sense that we've put a lot of research effort into batteries for transportation, for personal vehicles. But I think we need more effort on batteries to back up homes, because if we get more and more, sort of green electricity, then there's the question about, well, the sun isn't shining, the wind isn't blowing, right? So how do you back that up? So if you have the choice to do it at the power plant, but it's also reasonable to do it in the home. And when that type of battery doesn't need to be as, how do I say, as compact and as light as you need for a vehicle. So you have greater flexibility in the choices, and cost, it's just low cost and earth abundance and non-toxic. Those are the things that matter in that scenario. And I'd say that in particular is important in the developing world, because in East Africa we have all hydro and lots of solar that is not yet exploited. And the problem in many places is the grid, the quality of the grid. It's not so much that you don't really have electricity. Certainly in Addis Ababa, you have plenty of electricity, but the power goes out because the grid is no good. So if you have much more delocalized backup by having low-cost batteries that don't need to meet the needs for transportation, but meet the needs for local storage, where you have lots of area and you absolutely don't care about the mass, that's, I think, the important areas. And we know that the developing world needs to get electricity and needs to do it without fossil, because otherwise we're all dead.
I agree, yeah. But in your opinion, what are the main challenges and the opportunities maybe in advancing the practical implementation of fuel cell technology for the widespread use?
So the challenge for fuel cells has been and continues to be access to hydrogen. And this is why in my laboratory, we've been doing the reversible cells, which can locally make hydrogen when you have electricity. And so that makes them operable like a battery. So that is the other area where I think a real breakthrough is going to happen. I mean, I would say that the technology breakthrough has happened in that regards. It's now a matter of manufacturing and scale up, because that is a winning technology that doesn't require the hydrogen infrastructure. Now, that said, the US is investing huge amounts of money now in the hydrogen infrastructure. And it's not clear to me what's changed since 2008, when the US decided not to pursue the hydrogen infrastructure anymore. So I've been trying to ask, people at Department of Energy, what's changed? Why did we think hydrogen was a bad idea when Obama came in, and now we think it's a good idea now? I do not understand. But the excitement around hydrogen is now immense.
I mean, yeah, indeed. I think the future of renewable energy holds an immense promise, and can't wait to see what the future holds. And let's shift our focus to your illustrious career and the recognitions that you have received. Your remarkable career has been marked by numerous recognitions, including the NSF National Young Investigators Award in '94, the J.B. Wagner Award in 2001, the Chemical Pioneers Award of the Chemical Heritage Foundation in 2010, and the International Ceramics Prize for the World Academy of Ceramics in 2012. You have also been inducted into the African Academy of Science in 2016, and recently the 2021 MRS Communications Lecture Award, just to mention a few, right? So I would like to ask, what drives your commitment to such excellence and the determination to overcome barriers?
Yeah, I guess, maybe this goes back to the role model from my father. I mean, I just haven't seen a different way. So I think that, if you've got the opportunity to push the frontier, that you should take it. And it's fun. And I'll be honest that I do enjoy the recognition. There's some value there. But really, it's really great when your students do amazing work and that you've been able to teach them something and you've got this great product out of it, which is really pushing the frontier. It is just fun to be able to, deliver some insight that no one else has ever had. It's truly fun. And I also do value, though, the making sure that everything is correct in terms of the precision with which we do things. That's also maybe something, a legacy from my father, where I said he was attention to detail as well.
Yeah, your dedication to excellence is truly commendable. And so now let's discuss the challenge that you have faced and the lessons you have learned throughout your career. So let's start with the hardest hurdle that you encountered in your career and how you overcame it.
Let's see, the hardest situations that I've encountered. I think that how do I say? Part of me feels like the difficulties that I've encountered are pretty typical of any student or researcher, right? Maybe you didn't do well on a test, right? So you get up and you do it again. Or maybe your proposal was rejected. That happens all the time. You rewrite and resubmit. On the other hand, sometimes I think maybe I underestimate the challenges of having come to this country, and still sometimes feeling like an outsider here, without actually feeling like an insider in Ethiopia. So maybe I'm an outsider everywhere. But I don't know how to, I don't know how to, put a tangible on that. I think that everybody faces challenges, and everyone has a backstory. I don't think that I've had ones that were particularly difficult. So I would say, for example, maybe the 2 years that I lived in Germany were trying, because Germans weren't particularly used to seeing people of color, even less so than small town Minnesota. So that was a bit of a challenge. There are many times when I'm some of the challenges I'm just used to. Like especially when I was younger, it happens less to me now because I'm more personally known. But at a conference, I'd be constantly asked, where's the coffee? Like expectation that I'm, the part of the wait staff, right? This happened all the time. It just gets to be the point that it's funny. I had a student actually come to my office. Not a student that I knew. It was a student who was visiting campus who knocked on my door and looked at me and said, "Oh, where's Professor Haile?" All right, of course he says Haile. All right. So, and I was like, and he looks around my office, expecting someone else to be there. I said, "Well, she's not here right now." And I had a really entertaining conversation with this student, asking him why he wanted to speak with her. Well, he wants to join our research group. And I said, well, have you looked at what she does? Have you looked at her website?
What she looks like?
I had to entertain myself. Yeah, and at the end of this, I said, I don't think she's going to want to take you in her group.
It is.
Right. So you turn these challenges into just, amusing scenarios.
Yeah, it is impressive how you manage to handle such situations with humor and resilience. That's an important lesson. And what other important lessons have you learned on your way to where you're now?
Yeah, and to that aspect, right, there's a lot of questions that come to me about, how is it being a woman of color in science, right? I'm almost always the only one in the room, in terms of women of color, right? Very, very rare. There might be a few women, there might be a few people, men, but very few women of color. And so the challenge that I actually see in that is and I also look young, despite the fact that I'm now pushing 60, but I still look young.
Oh, wow.
So the challenge I see is that when I have some sort of interaction with someone that I find in some way unpleasant, I struggle with saying, is it because I'm a woman? Is it because of my skin color? Is it because I look young? Or is it just the way this person is, right? So for me, it's never possible to disentangle those. And ultimately, I have to remind myself, and this is what I tell my students all the time, is that it's on them. It's if someone is mistreating you in some way, that's a reflection of them. That's not a reflection on you. And I think when you're younger, it's a little bit harder to realize that. But when you get older, you just have much thicker skin because you've been dealing with it for a long time. As I said, you come up with a way to amuse yourself with it. So that, I think that's been a challenge. But there's still times where you just never know, why was I not invited to the table? And so you say, well, I'm just going to go sit at the table anyway. Because there's a famous saying that says, if you're not on the table, you're on the menu. So you just have to be demanding and pushy. And this is also a cultural thing, because that piece of me that remembers my Ethiopian cultural upbringing is that you are not pushy, and you are not loud, and you certainly don't tell people, what great things you've done. But to be successful in the U.S., that's what's required, and you just have to do that. The other small challenge that I find is that, of course, everybody remembers me because they've never seen a woman of color in science besides me, right? And so someone will come up to me, like 5 years from some conference, I'm like, oh my God, you look like everybody else I ever met. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, looking back on your journey, is there anything that you would have done differently, or any advice you'd give to your younger self?
There are a few, obviously we all make mistakes. So of course I think of events and situations where I should have handled that better. But in terms of big picture decisions, there's not really that much. There's not that much. I probably would have told myself to get a little more exercise when I was young.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing those valuable lessons. So before we conclude, let's explore your views on some broader topics, starting with the challenge and opportunities in Africa. So I would like to hear your thoughts on Africa. From your perspective, what do you consider the most significant challenge that the continent is currently facing?
Yeah. Boy, that's a big question all in one to answer in 1 second. I've been participating in things like the African MRS, Materials Research Society. I'm a board member for that. So we plan materials conferences every 2 years. So we had one in Addis Ababa a few years ago. Next one is coming up in Rwanda a year from now. So I have an opportunity to, go back and forth. I've also participated, actually organized a 2-week school that happens in East Africa. We've done it 4 times now to bring together US and African students to try to get them to develop collaborations and sort of, bridge the cultural divide and get people to understand each other and learn about each other's situations and so on. So and I'm also part of my sister has built a school in Debre Berhan, Haile Manas Academy, and we'll be graduating our first class of students this spring.
That's great.
Yeah. So what is my view from all of this experience, right? Because of course I left, in 1976 and didn't go back for almost 30 years. I would say that the biggest challenge is perhaps an inability to use the resources locally in a way that helps the local population. The world is still set up for Africa to export raw products and then re-import the produced products, right? The manufactured products. And that is such a difficult situation to unravel. And every step of the way, you have to fight. You have to fight being able to get imports of small pieces so that you can build a manufacturing plant. And there's just, and the Western world is not willing to support Africa in that development. China seems to be interested in that, but then you also have to be very cautious because of, what that means, right? There's nobody who's just wants to help Africa, right? Everybody wants something back. And so how do you get caught up in that scenario? It's not clear to me how you do that, but you certainly need to have much less corruption. That's also a huge problem, because whenever you try to get started, then you face a lot of, pressure to engage in bribery so that you can, go forward. I mean, it's really very difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. As you noted earlier, Africa has a vast potential for clean energy with abundant, high-quality renewable resources at its disposal. So how can African countries leverage this natural resource to foster innovation and address energy challenges in the continent?
Yeah. So right. So certainly solar and hydro and wind and geothermal as well in the Rift Valley is a huge resource. I don't know what policies need to be in order to support those, but I think whatever can be done to increase the local manufacturing would be extremely valuable. I don't know what kind of policies can support that, but making sure that happens. The other piece is, I was just reading that Ethiopia is building some manufacturing plant for or assembling trucks with combustion engines. Like, why would you do that? Why the world is about to move away from combustion engines. In Europe, you're not going to be able to sell them in 5 years from now. I mean, it's just such a bad investment. So people don't see a little bit further down. I think there's too much of a trying to copy the bad things of the West as opposed to copying the good things of the West. Ethiopia and Addis Ababa, there's constant like, oh, look, we built this big road and, look at all our development. And roads are not development. It's following a bad step. So I think, a much better urban planning that allows fewer cars so that you can have better air quality, better quality of life overall. But you just can't, it's very hard to see beyond that. So I don't know. It's such a huge problem. I just cannot imagine what gets done to solve it.
Yeah, but I completely agree with your insights on the challenge, problems, and some of the potential solutions that are crucial to the development of Africa. So now
let me just say, in terms of the solutions, part of what why we've opened the school is to help Ethiopians come up with the solutions, right? So that you have this educational base where people who are locally connected have this sort of creative thinking, that problem-solving thinking that can do it. So that's really our goal, because for me to come in and say, oh, this is what Ethiopia needs to do. I've been away for 40 years. Who's going to listen to me? So,
yes, yeah, you're right. I need commitment to that is, as you said, evidence through your founding of the Haile Academy in Ethiopia. So can you share more about the Academy's mission and the impact that it already achieved and what you hope it will have on the students and the broader community overall?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about it. And again, I do have to give 95% of the credit to my sister Ruka, who decided that she wanted to do something that was important in Ethiopia. And so the school is in Debre Birhan, which, as you know, is about a 4-hour drive from Addis Ababa. And it was an explicit decision also to not be in Addis Ababa, because the country needs to develop. It can't have everything be in the capital city. So what we're envisioning is 100 students per grade, 50 girls, 50 boys. So it's a co-ed boarding school. And because it is a boarding school, you really get to influence the students. And our key objective is to have students be critical thinkers. I'm sure that you noticed the difference coming to the US from being in the educational system in Ethiopia. As a kid, you were asked a question in class. If you got it wrong, you had your hand out and the ruler came down on it, right? And students were terrified of teachers, absolutely terrified of the principal, right? I was shocked when we came to the US, and kids were friendly with their teachers. I was, what? Right? But to get away from that education is about fear, but instead that education is about joy of learning and joy of problem solving. And so we're, as I said, we're about to have our first class of graduates, and it's really incredible to see the way that the students change. So from when they first come, many of them are very shy, and even within a few months, they're able to articulate, just very clear spoken terms, what they're doing, why they're there. We had the president of the country come visit, the students gave the tour, and they were just really self-confident in speaking with someone at that level. And it's so great to see, because that is the thing that we don't build in students in Ethiopia. And if you don't have self-confidence, it's very hard to then say, I have a solution to this problem, I'd like to pursue it. Right?
Yeah, and it's really inspiring to hear about the academy. And I am hopeful that it will have a greater impact, not only on its students, but also on the educational system in Ethiopia. And kudos to everyone who has been contributing to it. And as you said, especially to your sister, Rebecca. So my next question is, why do you think people of African descent, especially women, are underrepresented in STEM fields, in your opinion? So you mentioned earlier that you are usually the only woman of color in the room. I'm currently in an AI conference, and I can attest to that, right? There is only one Black woman, and we are 3 Africans in total. So what do you think is the reason? And what do you think should be done to motivate more Africans to pursue their studies and career in STEM?
Yeah, I mean, so it's legacy, because things don't change overnight, right? And we also have to sort of break this down in the context of the US. The US population is what, maybe 15-20% Black? I don't know, something like that. And that group is certainly underrepresented in all areas of professional success. And that is absolutely legacy, because who gets born with an inheritance? Well, it's not people of color, right? And so it just perpetuates itself. I've had this crazy radical thought that there should be a 100% inheritance tax, and that all kids should then be born with the same financial standing, but no one will ever accept that, right? Because everyone wants to give to their own kids. Okay, that's fine. But if we do that, then you're never going to get racial equality. So you have to figure out how you're going to get there. Now, across Africa, it's why do the girls are not going into the STEM fields within Africa? I think that's very much cultural, and also in the US, it's very cultural, because in the US, sort of by definition, the girls and the boys are in the same families. It's not access to financial resources that keeps girls from being successful. It is cultural expectations, and that in some ways is easier to solve than it is to solve financial disparities, right? Because you just convince people that, hey, let your daughter do this, or encourage your daughter to do that, and oftentimes it's easier if you think about, oh, my own daughter, I want her to be successful. I don't want her to be just at the mercy of some husband who may divorce her and then leave her with nothing, right? So I think it's ultimately easier to address gender inequality in the developed world than it is to address racial inequality, because racial inequality is connected with equity, financial equity, right? So that is a harder problem. Now, in terms then of within Africa, within the African context, it's the same social dynamics that keep girls from going into STEM fields. And in all honesty, there's a greater influence of, Islamic religion, which has even more of this disparity than, say, the Christian religion, although Christian religion is also not great towards women. But I think in more recent times, Islam has been worse. So I'm not a fan of any religion, to be honest, as a scientist. Okay. And I see that in many times it brings in this, this gender inequality. So then in terms of African scientists being successful in the US, so diaspora coming to the US schools have no experience. Only now in the recent past 5 years do they have experience with students from Africa. They just have no idea. They're like, I mean, I have to argue with my colleagues about whether or not students from Ethiopia need to take a TOEFL. Like, high school is in English. Undergraduate education is in English. Don't make them waste their money on this, right? And the obstacles are really very high. And the US side doesn't understand that having a credit card to pay for your $100 application fee is just not feasible for people from Ethiopia to apply. They have to have a family member who's going to help them do it. It doesn't work otherwise. And on the US side, there's just no understanding. There's also no understanding of which schools are any good. So that is going to break down eventually, I think, and there'll be as many Africans in the US as there are, Chinese scientists who are, many at the PhD level. I think that's going to happen. And I think that many of them, because we now live in a world where travel is much easier and social connectivity through the internet is much higher, that these people will have impact back in Africa in a way that they could not have had a generation ago. So that's what I think will happen.
Yes, indeed. And that's part of what we are trying to do here at the Africa Inno as well, so that we can inspire the African youth to get into STEM and learn from the experiences of people of African descent who have excelled in STEM, such as yourself. So my next question is, as a distinguished scientist and distinguished engineer, what key skills and qualities do you believe that younger Africans should develop to excel in STEM fields and make a difference in their communities or in the world?
Yeah, I mean, it's to some extent the same qualities anyone should have, but that is, deep motivation to pursue these questions, and perseverance, curiosity, and inquisitiveness. Don't be afraid to ask those questions. So having the curiosity is the one piece, and then pursuing it by asking in a very, of course, respectful way. And not, my kids sometimes just want to, older son especially just wants to prove people wrong, but that's not what we need to do. We need to be asking questions because we're deeply curious, and know that it's hard work. I mean, it's not just a walk in the park. You do have to put in effort in order to be successful. Yeah.
Thank you. Those are valuable insights for inspiring young scientists. So as we conclude, let's lighten the mood with a more personal question. So what is something that someone wouldn't know by looking at your profile or website? Is there any fun facts?
Right. Fun facts. Fun facts. Boy, I am so publicly available. Let's see, my likeness was in the Penn Station because they decided to do the stars or something like that. And wanted to make stars out of women scientists. So you went into Penn Station, and a friend of my sister's saw it. She's like, I was in Penn Station. I saw your sister's face in the station. Nice. Yeah, so that was kind of fun.
Yeah. That's great. So finally, what words of encouragement or advice would you give to young Africans who are passionate about STEM and want to make a positive impact on their communities, or any final words you would like to say?
Please do it. We need everybody. We need everybody at the table. So please, pursue your passions. Don't let anybody tell you that you can't make it. You decide for yourself. Yeah.
Yes. Thanks so much. As we bring this enlightening conversation to a close, we at the Africa I Know extend our heartfelt gratitude to you, Professor, for sharing your wealth of knowledge, experiences, and inspiring perspectives. Your dedication to advancing science, fostering education, and addressing global challenges is truly inspirational. And I believe aspiring African science will learn a lot from your journey. So we wish you continued success in your endeavors, and we look forward to witnessing the ongoing impact of your groundbreaking works. So thank you for being with us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. My thanks to you. It's been wonderful speaking with you, and thank you for doing this important work.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.